Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Historical Humans podcast. Today we are going to Southeast Asia. We're going to be talking about the Philippines. My name's Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my co-host Coleman. Unfortunately, we think the Pinkertons might have finally gotten Aaron.
Yes,
More to be developed there.
yes. Unfortunately, our third head of the Hydra here is unavailable with us this week, so he will not be joining us to discuss Philippine Barangays, which was a very, shall we say, difficult topic for our research department to tackle. Pre, pre, shut up. Uh, Pre-Spanish Philippines actually does not have a lot of publicly available information and research on it, especially going into detail. This subject in particular, the barangays, was something that had caught our eye a while back and was very interesting and something we hadn't really heard a lot about. And it turns out most of the world hasn't either. So you'll be bearing with us, taking a little look at the collection of sort of everything we found in miniature as we go through this today.
Yes, our research department left a lot of interesting notes on the show notes. Mainly just a descent into madness, which is weirdly documented.
There are several blocks of them that say "Justin, do not say." That is one of them.
Oh,
Which
oh,
would
okay.
be we knew he would be tempted, but anyway, to start us off on a more official foot here, uh, we're gonna sort of define the Philippines because defining the Philippines as a singular unit is actually a pretty big mistake when looking at the historical pre-colonial barangays. It's an incredible mistake, but we'll get into why in just a minute. So, the Philippines is a collection of over 7,000 islands off the coast of Southeast Asia. You can see the problem begins early.
Yeah, how did they count 7,000? Did someone just go through, or do you think that's like a guesstimate?
Actually, no, that is actually what gave Spanish their quote unquote right to the Philippines was the fact that they actually went through and painstakingly mapped the coastline of
Oh,
the entire thing.
jeez.
And that was what the Dutch, Portuguese, and later English considered sufficient for Spanish to have a claim on the Philippines being Spanish territory. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yes, it
Uh,
is ours. We mapped it first, and everyone else was like, yeah, that looks like a pain in the ass. You can have it.
yeah. Uh, and it was a pain for the Spanish to manage, but that's not why we're here.
Oh, no.
Uh, these 7,000 islands contain a known 175 ethnic groups and over 100 languages and dialects. So, yeah, single entity.
A totally unified polity, clearly.
Yeah, yeah. This is making America look like a monolith, and I'm talking like the continents. uh, yeah. In fact, the Philippines was not treated as a single polity until the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, with the first Spanish expedition headed by none other than Ferdinand Magellan,
Oh,
a
good old
man
Magellan.
famous for the circumnavigation of the world, effectively proving once and for all that yes, the world is round. People, please stop.
He fell off one end and just showed up at the other end. It's not.
The world is not a sphere, it is a cylinder. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
I
Welcome to my
fully
TED Talk.
subscribe to cylinder Earth theory.
We keep choosing worse shapes. Next up, we're gonna go to Pentagon Earth.
We already have one of those. It's in DC.
We don't like it.
Okay,
Neither.
so the
Um,
Spanish in the Philippines, a story as old as the 16th century.
yeah, it's just yeah, from past 500 years. Um, at the time of the Spanish arrival, only the island of Mindanao possessed any sort of unified political entity that was larger than the village level, that was bigger than what was effectively a barangay. Um, Mindanao is the second largest island in the Philippines. It is also the island on which Islam was established. And due to the introduction of this, unifying religion, sultanates were formed and sort of ruled over the Barangays. This is the one place where you don't find Barangays as the predominant system of government. They're still there when the Spanish arrive. And once again, these Philippines encompassed, various estimates, like they encompassed, there was 150 distinct ethnic, cultural, and linguistic groups. The numbers do vary. We are giving you the different estimates and measurements that have been taken from various sources and sites. There's not a lot of agreement on how much is still there, much less how much was there 500 years ago.
It's kind of interesting because there's a paradox in mapping called the coastline paradox, which basically states that the closer you measure a coastline, the longer it gets because you start measuring nooks and crannies and inlets. Well, when it comes to identifying ethnic groups and languages, it's much in the same because you can look at an overarching group and you can think that they're very unified and that they're of one entity, but then you start looking at the sociocultural or even linguistic differences among those subgroups and you just start like really branching off. That tree grows infinitely larger, only a few branches up just because of that. So it becomes very difficult. And then you also run the issue, as Colum mentioned, that over the course of 500 years, that changes, that shifts. Unfortunately, there are ethnic groups that do die out in it, and there are some newer ones that have splintered off since.
Yeah.
It's almost like culture and people evolve.
And speaking of evolving,
Your
just
Pokemon
as
evolved?
the Philippines were not treated as a single, polity until the 16th century, the concept of a unified Philippine nation, of the Philippine national identity, did not begin until the 19th century. Because getting rid of Spain is a wonderful reason to get everyone together for a party.
You know, it's very interesting when you see these former colonies because you see a lot of different groups binding together to get rid of the colonial power. Like the 13 colonies that all came from different parts and walks of life. You know, Canada and their amicable breakup.
Yeah. Anyway, and with that, we see, the modern government of the Philippines, and the modern government of the Philippines uses barangays as part of their management of this, very diverse collection of 7,000 islands. In the modern term, the barangay is the smallest unit of government in the Philippines. So every city, municipality, town, county, everything in the Philippines is comprised of barangays. There is currently, as of the last updated census in 2021, 42,046 barangays across the Philippines.
That's a pretty solid number, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if only they added 23 more, they could have a really good number, but, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That is more than 10 times the number of counties in the United States of America.
But also, when you look at the size, they have a minimum population of 2 to 5,000. Is that what's?
So, in modern terms, there is a minimum population required to fill a barangay. The nearest analogy I have for this is when the United States was deciding what is and is not a state within its territory. There was a minimum population requirement of several of, I think, 50,000, 100,000, something like that, in order to be considered for statehood. And for to be considered a barangay, you must have 2,000 people in a rural district, or 5,000 if you are in a urbanized location like a city.
So I wonder what the actual equivalent of that would be, because when I think 2000, I think of a fairly small town.
Yeah,
So
and
you're
if
talking there's 42,000 minimum small towns.
yeah, yeah, and keep in mind that doesn't have to be a single town. A town of 4,000 people can have two barangays. Uh, a city can have multiple barangays. Every city, every town, every county, everything is made up of barangays.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the homeowners associations have come to life and taken over.
Oh no! Our neighborhood
A
doesn't
very,
stand for
a,
that. We
a
only put out
very,
white peonies on Tuesdays.
it's a very cursed analogy, but yeah, it is my barangays are micro governments.
Okay. Yeah, so
um,
not something that we're very familiar in the West.
yeah. And every modern barangay consists of a combination of appointed and elected officials. Um, as so there's this sort of combination of democracy and uh, shall we say, government mandates going on, which is very Filipino uh, in how it works. And the last thing we really have for you on the sort of modern barangays as they are is a little bit of a linguistics lesson here that's going to come up a couple other times. Uh, but the term barangay is derived from the word balangay, which is, depending on who you ask, a Malay and or a Tagalog term for the type of boats that brought the settlers to the Philippines from Borneo and Southeast Asia. Now, Tagalog, like most languages in the Philippines, is an Austronesian language. It is a language native to the Philippines. Um, it is like all Malaysian languages and most Filipino languages, Austronesian, and thus we're really start mincing words when we try to define exactly to what language the term Balangay derives, seeing as how it's a minimum of 500 years out of date.
500
Uh,
years. I mean,
yeah,
that's a drop in the bucket comparatively, right?
not really. Especially when we're talking about the transition from one word, Balangay, to another word, Barangay. That happened at least 500 years ago with the arrival of the Spanish, if not far earlier, as something that just is natural linguistic drift. Um, but yeah. With that, we're going to get to the matter at hand, which is the Philippine Barangays. These are the pre-colonial, pre-Spanish ones that we wanted to look at, and they
Ooh,
were
so
very hard.
the more indigenous
Yeah,
Filipinos.
yeah. They were very hard to find information on, not least part because they share a name with the modern system of government. That was one of the many obstacles we had to work around in finding information on this. So we hope we've done the work so you don't have to. But the first barangays on the Philippines were likely coastal settlements resulting from migration from Southeast Asia. And one of the lovely things that we have for this supposed origin is that both the archaeological record and the oral traditions that have survived the 500 years since colonization, they agree on this. They agree on this matter. They agree that people came on boats and lived on the coast and the rivers. um, the original villages that comprise these barangays were often made up by the members of a single Malaysian boat. So
Wow.
basically, you got off the boat and that was your town. It's it's what's the what's the joke? There is no history of America. Yesterday we got off the boat and today we bathed in the river.
I mean, that basically
That's
is any coastal settlement, though.
yeah.
Realistically, you find a safe enough harbor, you throw your supplies off the ship, and you get far enough back the tide doesn't affect you, and you build up.
Yep. Yeah, and most of the early barangays were coastal or riverine in nature. There
It's
is a
almost like they got
reliance.
to the islands by ship.
Yeah, yeah. There's a reliance on fishing for food. There's a reliance on waterways for travel, and in fact, we have traced a lot of the early footpaths, roads, game trails, the things that the people were using uh, way back when these first ships got there. We've traced them, and they almost all just parallel a riverbank or a coastline. Like, will not leave sight of it, kind of paralleling.
I mean, at the very base level, that's an easy way for navigation, too. You're able
Yep.
to see where you are, you're able to navigate and orient yourself. You don't get lost in deep forests.
Yeah, and the Philippines are not like flat open land. It is heavily forested. It is mountainous. Uh, it, it's not a particularly inviting environment for the people who live on the boat.
Which is why the Polynesians truly have, like, one of the biggest claims to humans will settle anywhere. Because Polynesia is not easy to settle. I mean, there's a lot of islands, but they're all volcanic islands. They're all densely jungled. They're all rainforest. You have to sail to get there. And they're just like, okay. They traveled all across the Pacific. We've proven that.
Yeah, although I do think the number one prize for humans will settle anywhere goes to the people who live at McMurdo Sound. See, hello Antarctica. Oh god. But yes, these settlements, they followed the riverbanks. Water was was their travel, was their trade, was their food, and in fact, they traded a lot. They traded with a number of near and even some not so near entities. They traded with Japan, the Han Chinese, India, and even the Arabs, who do come down and sort of proselytize their way into Mindanao, and convert it. But you know,
And it's
just
interesting, though. You see this seafaring group, and obviously they're going to have really distinct trade routes because, well, when we're talking about coastal areas, so they're going to have to trade and bring in certain goods. But also, when you have that kind of capability that other dynasties and other groups don't have quite as well developed, it makes trade so much better. You become that middleman.
Yeah, yeah, it is very good. And they actually, they traded primarily rice, spices, and aromatics, which would be things like incense. Basically, they are selling car fresheners
Oh no!
to
Silk
to the
Road
Chinese.
used car air fresheners.
Yeah, to the Chinese, to India, and to Southeast Asia. The Philippines do, I believe, interact with the Indonesian empires, um, which were themselves empires of the sea, and so there's just a lot of love there. And there is something I do want to take a moment to talk about here, and just the fact that Japan gets mentioned very casually as a trade partner of the Philippine Borneos. Um, do you have any idea how horribly freaking hard it is to get the Japanese to trade with you? Like pre
I
20th century Japan was incredibly isolationist for
it,
so much of its history.
it's almost as though early Japanese resentment of the U.S. started after the U.S. blockaded one of their most popular ports to try and force them to open trade.
I'm talking before that. We have there is I don't know if it's written here or later. It's written a few bullets down, but we have confirmation of trade with China as early as 982 CE.
Yeah, but Japan's a little different than China.
Yeah, Japan's a little different. I'm just saying, like, we are, but the point is that the
The historical
Philippines
relations are there, yes.
are doing this long before the United States of America is even a thing.
Oh, I know, but just to emphasize how difficult relations were with Japan,
Yeah,
the U.S., the way they opened that door was just by,
yeah.
shutting it.
Well, Japan refused to trade with anyone until a certain U.S. Fleet firebombed one of their cities over the issue.
Not to mention blockaded the port entirely.
Yes, but it was the firebombing that really got things going. Because even with the blockade, they said you won't shoot us.
Yeah, like I said, there's almost a reason why the resentment was built up, but you know.
Yeah, but that's not what we're here for today, is it? Um, uh, and the one of the really surprising things with the Philippines, and it actually isn't that surprising the more you think about it, but even with all these trade partners, the cultural influence from the rest of Asia is marginal. The Philippines are so politically and culturally fragmented that, you know, the people trading with India aren't the ones trading with China, aren't the ones trading with Japan. And even when two different groups trade with China, they bring back different things. And so there is no one entity to influence and win over and sort of, um, you know, what's the word? What's the word for it? To acclimate to your culture.
Or have
Because
cultural diffusion, I think is the word you're
yeah,
looking for
yeah.
specifically.
You can't diffuse your culture into them because every village is an entirely separate nation.
Well, and you can also just tell from that as well that you had specialized traders as well. Because if it was just everyday people, you would see that diffusion happen at a significantly larger rate. If it is specifically traders, and they are, culturally um, similar to the people that they're also trading. Not that they're trade partners, but if they're all in a group and they're all specific traders, they're not going to lose that identity as easily. They're not going to introduce new characteristics into that group.
Yes, and that is actually an important point. I probably should have put it up here just because you're making the connection. But there's actually a tax somewhere in here that is here is it's called buis. It's a tribute, and it is a tribute of primarily food, uh, to be taken not only from people, not only as like a tax from like the people who live in a barangay, but also from any merchant who trades there. Um, so you can kind of see that like the focus is still on subsistence, even as the specialized traders are being taxed. You're being taxed not in money, but in you know food goods. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot with a lot of merchant sailors as well.
yeah. But imagine the import tax. That'll be one shrimp cocktail.
Oh, okay, sure. The priest is behind, like,
Yeah,
some
yeah.
of your
There's
finest bluefin tuna that you caught on your trip.
yeah.
Let's see
Some
if he's got that one. They pull out a giant fish, like, oh.
yeah. It's uh yeah. Additionally, one of the things that makes sort of puppeting and putting your a foreign culture into the Philippines very difficult is the fact that the Philippines weren't colonized all in one go. It's 7,000 islands. There are multiple waves of settlement and immigration from multiple different places. Um, the for the most part it's Austronesian, but anywhere in all of Southeast Asia is fair game for landing on the Philippines. And so, because of this very diverse assembly of peoples, the Barangays really don't see much political unity. There's not a lot of shared cultural identity between the different barangays. There's not even a lot of shared communication. And so, you can, completely, uh, you know, Japinify an entire barangay and walk 20 minutes down the coast and come across someone who's never heard of Japan. It's a beautiful place like that. Additionally, the unifying factors of Southeast Asia in terms of religion, which are primarily Buddhism and Hinduism, neither of those religions really reach the islands. They don't convert over. Buddhism gets into Japan, of all places, so it's a very it's a very welcome. It's a very much gets into your country kind of religion. uh, for for all of that, and the one big thing that does appear to have an impact, though, is writing. Uh, the Philippines, in general, seem to have imported a form of Sanskrit from India. At which point, it promptly, scatters like buckshot across the
Writing?
island. Yeah. And immediately everyone has their own take on it, and no two
Oh
systems match.
no. It sounds like the Philippines was just a hot shot for diffusion.
It
It's
was,
like,
yeah, it
here's a
was,
great idea, and now it's changed.
yeah. You remember how we said there's 42,000 modern barangays? Well, the population requirement for even the most rural barangay is probably higher than the most populous barangay prior to Spanish contact. So you're influencing several hundred people at best every time you give them something. It's a very few thing. And the this system really does show itself as a predominant form of social organization among the indigenous Filipinos. And with that organization, every everything from a company to a nation to a homeowners association needs a head of state. And that job fell upon what is known as the Datu. And I'm definitely not saying that right. The Datu, or at least the first Datus, were typically the captains of the boats that reached the Philippines. Um, they would rule over a village established by their family, and from there, the Datu would typically be an inherited role. Um, your Datu would first inherit along lines of male primogeniture, firstborn son, secondborn son, thirdborn son, so on. However, if there were no male heirs available, it would immediately switch over to female primogeniture and go along the lines of daughters. Should, for whatever reason, no heir, no family of the Datu be present or available to succeed the Datu, the village would appoint one. The barangay would come together and appoint one, each with its own particular customs. Some might be considered elective by modern democratic systems. Most were probably a council of elders, priests, wise men, people of status meeting in a closed door to discuss which one of them should take power. um, you know, it was it was to each their own with the barangays. The system varied wildly.
It's my job. No, mine. No, I think I should have it. Well, I think we should nominate that guy.
Yeah. The and fun fact, you could actually also win the job of Datu. If you could prove that you were a more capable leader during a crisis or
Oh.
during a time of succession, you could supersede the position. This is typically because the Datu's primary jobs are to administer in peace and to lead in war. So if you can prove yourself to be charismatic and have good ideas repeatedly, you could take the Datu's job.
Hmm.
Uh, I personally imagine a lot of people went missing before that could happen. But yeah, um, and the power of these Datus is not absolute. It's very tempting to look at them and think of them as petty little kings of petty little hills, but these are not European monarchs. These are barangay Datus. And so their power was very heavily bounded by traditions and customs of the individual barangay. And these traditions and customs varied, and with it did the power of the Datu. But their primary job was the collection of buwis, which is tribute in form of food paid from people and merchants to the Datu. The purpose of this was to primarily sustain the Datu and their family, so that the Datu could spend the whole of their time uh, managing the needs of the people, because the Datu does serve as the chief judge, executor, and legislator of the barangay. So making a new law, settling disputes between neighbors, dealing with the people from the barangay next door. He has to deal, that's the full time job of the Datu. And so this food tax was so that, you know, the man running your country doesn't starve and you don't really have to pay him a salary.
The food tax, the food tax.
Yeah. Yes. America tried to implement one of these and people rioted.
Oh, I still remember when Chicago implemented the sugar tax.
Yeah. Do not tell Americans what they can't eat, ladies and
Cases of
gentlemen.
soda went up by like $4 a case because it was charged per ounce.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely, lovely, lovely bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, these barangays, the largest of them by the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, contain between 30 and 100 families and would typically have a population of less than 500 people, which means that it would take at minimum four pre-colonial barangays to constitute one modern municipal barangay in the modern government of the Philippines. So these were, very much not large. Some of these barangays were so small they would contain less than 30 people, being only one or two extended
Oh,
families.
hold on. I thought there was a limit. There was a minimum requirement for the barangays.
For the modern ones, the pre-modern ones was just any group of people living under the laws of a datu.
God, just imagine you and your buddies are like, yeah, we're a barangay now. This is
Yeah,
our commune. We charge
yeah.
Joe for
At
food.
which, at which point, the larger barangays probably try to murder you.
Hmm.
this is these are not love, peace, and happiness kind of people here. All right, these people defend what they believe to be theirs
we're gonna
very aggressively.
we're gonna go hippie commune like doomsday bunker prepper. We're gonna have defensive fortifications, pitfall traps. We'll defend
Yep,
this barangay to our death.
yeah, yeah. And once again, larger polities did exist on the island of Mindanao due to the conversion of that island to Islam and the formation of sultanates there. Um, Now, these barangays, they operated much in the same way of a European city state. There's a single central community that controls a periphery of territory that it claims. And that's about as far as the analogy go, because unlike European city states, a barangay did not have a set, defined physical boundaries. Um, the uh, Barangay did not claim any particular set of territory, but rather it was whatever area the current Datu and the current barangay could exert control over. And with this, we come to sort of the definition of the barangay. It's not defined by, like we would think of it as, I'm, Canadian or I'm Texan or anything like that. It's not defined about being from a certain place. It's defined by being loyal and having a connection to an individual dat, to an individual leader. So, you know, uh, in American politics, I'm a Trumper, I'm Biden, I'm this, I'm that. It's you are swearing yourself to a leader, and whatever territory you inhabit with that leader is the territory. When that leader dies, you swear yourself to a new leader, and whatever territory that leader has is the new territory you're associated with.
Oh no,
It could be
he's
mostly the same, it could be on the other side of the continent.
Colum's dove into modern politics. Run!
Yep. Yeah, but it is a very good analogy, and that's the only reason I bring it up is people defining themselves by being very loyal to a single political figure rather than to a single geopolitical entity.
Oh, come on. People have never done that. They have never aligned themselves with a single political entity and made it their entire persona.
Yeah, a single political figure. Yep.
A single one.
But, yeah, no, and so that's how it is. Everyone in a barangay is bound to the datu. The territory and population of the barangay could change with the ascension of each new datu. Remember how we talked about people being able to up jump, the social ladder and claim that?
He's not
Well,
doing a good enough job. I will do better.
welcome to the schism and the fission. One barangay becomes two. As one, strong man dies out, his successor doesn't hold on to all of it, and we split.
Oh no.
We split. And you're wondering why the Spanish were coming across ones with less than 30 people. It is a barangay system is very easy to divide and very hard to unify. Because it's all about who are you personally invested in.
I could only see issues and schisms coming from that, honestly.
Oh yeah. It gets worse.
Oh no. How can it possibly get much worse? Besides the Spanish invading.
Because the barangay system did not have a sedentary lifestyle. There was a constant shifting of territory, even when the barangay was stable under a single datu, as they did a form of shifting cultivation, which is just sort of this, not quite agriculture, but sort of, we're encouraging certain plants to grow in general and then just letting them grow like wild grain.
It's a strategy that a lot of modern gatherers take, in that what they'll do is they'll harvest something, and they'll harvest it in a certain area, and that kind of becomes that specific area. And in terms of a lot of cultures and civilizations, what they'll do is they go, hey, the berries are blooming, let's go move over here for a little bit. Oh, hey, apples are blooming, let's go over here. Hey, these wild stalks of rice are growing, let's go over here. And they just basically kept hopping between where the resources were the most readily available, and usually this did tie into seasonality.
Yeah, and they also supplement this with hunting and fishing. And in fact, the only place where we have agriculture is in the mountains of northern Luzon. Luzon is the largest island of the Philippines, and there, rice terraces date back 2,000 years.
So clearly a good area for agriculture.
It's a very good area for specifically rice. The geography is perfect.
Well, and the crazy thing too, just kind of going off on a side tangent for a moment, one of the things that's really important and that people should note in reference when we talk about this stuff is rice per acre provides more calories than pretty much any other substance that can be grown. Their calorie per acre just allows populations to explode, and that's why you do see large jumps in populations and of groups in these regions, is because the land can actually support it.
Yeah. There's a reason why Luzon is home to Manila, the capital of the modern Philippines. It's not just because the island is big. It's because it's also where the food is.
Easily grown, yeah. I mean, you see that settlement pattern across the world of where you can grow food regularly, people will settle down and build cities.
Yeah.
And empires.
Yeah.
And empires.
Those cities, unfortunately, are Spanish because that's the administrative there. But back to the barangays themselves, there are 3 distinct social groups in the barangays, and it's actually kind of interesting calling them social groups, because you really do have to. You cannot call them classes because of just how fluid class mobility is within a barangay. The first group is the Datu, their family, and other associated nobility. This group is defined as basically the ruler of the barangay and the people directly associated with them. This is, the people, very much on the top. This is essentially the government, which is, the head of state and their family, for the most part.
Oh, of course, nepotism.
Yeah. Then there are the freeholders. This is anyone who lives in a barangay that's not in debt or poverty, but also is not directly associated with the datu. This is where most people end up residing. And then finally, there are dependents. These are sharecroppers, debt workers, and prisoners of war. Uh, and this class system was very much not rigid at all, as there's a very strong social mobility, so much so that status, though inherited from generation to generation, rarely lasted more than two. Um, as there is both frequent interclass marriage and manumission as a form of reward was common. Manumission is when you release someone from servitude. Would basically be the equivalent of announcing a debtor or that their debts are cleared or that a prisoner of war is free to go. You are no longer holding someone in servitude.
Wow, you can actually gain your freedom.
Yep. Yeah, it was a very common thing of in the Philippines of just them going, yeah, you're my sharecropper, you're my debtor because you owed me, 12 baskets of fish. You've worked that off. You're free.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
system you don't see very often where, oh, your debts are actually paid off? Okay. No, in the U.S., it's like, sign this predatory loan.
Yeah.
Oh, now you owe us money.
Yeah. And there's a reason for that. And that's because more often than not, it takes very, very little for the debtor and the debtee to become related. As not only is the community small, but also the barangays were defined in terms of bilateral kinship. What this means is that patrilineal and matrilineal lines are treated with equal importance. So your father's fathers and your mother's mothers are both considered key aspects of your kinship system, of your family, of your relations. These are kept track of going back as far as possible. Europe does this a lot, but only with the patrilineal line. And so when you track both lines, what ends up happening is as soon as someone gets married, you suddenly find out that, his mother's mother's mother is also my mother's mother's mother. And thus, I am now keeping a family member in servitude, and that is wrong. Therefore, I must release this man.
Dang, so family ties can actually get you out of it.
Yeah, especially given the fact that there appears to have been no taboo or ban on marrying someone of lower social standing, which means it's entirely possible for someone at the bottom of the totem pole to marry into the Datu's family, at which point holding that person in bondage becomes very politically inconvenient. Just like, it's like, yeah, I got the president's cousin working in my sweatshop. I should probably not be doing that.
Oh, you mean good old Bill Biden?
Oh God, here we go. Demonetization. Here we go.
Oh, they won't demonetize us over that joke.
You never know. Um, and another very interesting that comes out of this bilateral kinship is because the female line is considered on par with the male line. Divorce is socially acceptable, and does in fact happen. As when you consider the fact that women hold equal standing in determining your lineage, well then women also have the right to leave a marriage.
What?
Yeah.
Women have the rights of divorce?
Yeah. Yeah. We're gonna add that to the list of things that freaked out the Spanish when they showed up.
Oh my god! And the beautiful part of that is the Spanish are coming in like Catholic to the bones. Like they had witnessed the schism in England only 2 centuries prior. Like,
Yeah. And this is keep in mind this is 16th century Spanish. These are Inquisition Spanish.
nobody expects the Inquisition.
Yeah. And speaking of Inquisitions,
Oh no.
we're going to talk about the religion.
Oh no.
So, religion, social structure, and economic system within the barangays is as highly diverse as the barangays themselves, which means that there's about several 100,000 different versions of everything. The giant, like, infinite combination lock for these people. As the the social structure and economic systems were known to change not only from barangay to barangay, but also from datu to datu as leaders made adjustments to how they felt things should be run. Uh, there's in fact so much variability in these systems that even the smaller islands display considerable diversity in terms of their politics, economics, and philosophies, as well as their religious systems. You know,
I find it very interesting that there's so many microcosms, but that's kind of the nature of having all these different islands and different barangay micro groups.
yeah, and it's only because the Spanish claimed the entire section as its own like region that the Philippines are even really initially considered a single entity instead of what they are, which is this multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, you know, conglomerate. It's not a unified polity. You know, it's probably more diverse than the United States in some ways.
Well,
That's saying
that's
something.
yeah, and the fact that they were able to do it in a system that somewhat worked and wasn't nearly as divisive. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And now the first religious hierarchy did emerge with the arrival of the Islam in the 15th century, just 100 years before the Spanish. And with this, there was the establishment of two sultanates, one in Mindanao and one on the Sulu archipelago. I hear that one likes fencing. Uh, and the sultanates were the first thing that sort of superseded the barangays as a combined religious and secular authority, as the sultanate would rule over a number of barangays and effectively serve as the default, form of government instead of the barangays. That's not to say that barangays didn't cooperate or form conglomerates. They did, and we'll discuss those later. But as far as a larger unified political entity existing, it was really just these two sultanates. Um, when the Spanish do arrive, they record most of the religions as animism and move on. What animism means is it's effectively the catch all term for any belief system that holds spirits tied to this world. So if you talk about, uh, the spirit of your ancestor, if you talk about personifying the river or the sun, you're animistic. It's such a non-starter term
well, and
in so many ways.
and the frustrating thing is the Spanish, especially as we made a joke about the Inquisition, the Spanish were notorious for their whole conversion or die methodologies.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
obviously, we know that the Philippines is a very Catholic area now, and there's only one way for that to happen. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, the Spanish set about converting the island to Catholicism. Now, we do have some records of what they came across. The primary practices they seem to have encountered were ancestor worship and communions with guardians of nature, which are themselves very common practices in a number of religions and spiritual systems. Uh, the concept that nature is a personifiable force or that our ancestors had souls and we can talk to them is pretty baseline human spirituality. They do, in fact, record a handful of these religions in more detail. And we do have a few details, and by details, I mean snippets on three different Filipino ethnic religions. The first is what is referred to as the Visayans. Uh, these people are recorded as worshiping their ancestors, worshiping the spirits of nature, and having gods of particular locations and activities. And that sounds very vague because it is. The Spanish weren't interested in details. And if you think about it, that actually could describe effectively the entirety of the Greco-Roman pantheons, because spirits of places and specific activities. Meet Athena, the goddess of war and weaving. Meet meet the nymphs, the goddesses of this particular spring. You understand how very quickly it's like this very much qualifies as a complex, sophisticated religion. Uh,
But they just worship trees and animals, according to the Spaniards. Like I
yeah,
know, and
it's
there's obviously some remnants of this that have survived and pervaded. They never fully die out, but
yeah.
it is sad that we lost all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is we didn't lose all of it, because one of the things I found when I was researching this and had to go through a lot of the Spanish colonial times is Spain was actually very bad at administering most of the smaller islands. And a number of them only really found out they were ruled by the Spanish when the Philippines declared itself a nation.
God.
So some did survive. Just, keep in mind 7,000 islands, at least 150 distinct ethnic, linguistic, and cultural groups.
And the
There was damage done.
well, also let's not forget that the Philippines were also controlled by the U.S. for a period of time, and we know how good the U.S. has been at cultural wipeouts.
Respecting indigenous value systems.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. Can we even say the word respecting in the same sentence?
Not until the
Uh,
Treaty of
it-
Fort Laramie is
oh,
respected, but that's a whole.
here
Hey,
Yay,
if we have any indigenous
politics.
listeners, the shout out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, someone put that down for a potential future episode come next season.
Oh, the Treaty of Fort Laramie.
Yeah. Yeah,
Ooh, that'd
let's
be a
start
good one.
let's start a fire. But yeah, it's like a lot of the stuff we have here is very vague and very purposely vague to make it seem mysterious and primitive, when in fact it's probably not. The next group we have we found a record of is what is known as the Bicolanos, which the we do have actually more details on that are really available because of how bizarre the Spanish found them. Primarily because these people had female shamans called Balian, who delivered their prayers in song and claimed to speak with the voice of the departed. Um, so naturally, singing women channeling their ancestors, that definitely caught the eye of the Spanish. Uh, Not the least of which because apparently allowing a woman to do things is exotic to these people.
Well, I mean, you do see female shamans across the world. You see them in
Yeah,
different cultures. I mean, even the Spanish had the nuns. So
yeah.
I wonder if to them this is some bastardization or some twist off of that because, even though they were world adventuring, high sea sailing folk, they still always somehow ended up back in Rome.
Yeah. One of the interesting things I did find was there were some scholastic arguments being made for inclusion of potentially, I believe, trans people within the Bicolanos, as the Spanish do record male Balians as well. However, those seem to be exceptions rather than the rule, and they appear to have conformed to the female code of dress, which was an interesting scholastic argument. We will probably never know, um, as again, it's an exception to a rule of a system that has been largely devastated for several hundred years. Um, the final group that we have for religious recording that I was able to dig up was the Tagalogs. Yes, those wonderful people whose language gives us Barangays, the term itself. We actually have a deity for the Tagalogs. They actually recorded a name of a deity, which is Lakapati, who is a hermaphrodite deity, a deity possessing both male and female genitalia. That was worshipped during I believe, the planting season, uh, out in open fields as a sort of as a very much a fertility deity. Uh, with the obvious connotations there. And as we said before, some Filipino religions are still practiced, but for the most part, there has been a lot of devastation, to the indigenous practices, which is a shame. But that is what happens with colonialism.
And the Philippines have 500 plus years of it.
Yeah, yeah. Each and with That's going to bring us to our final segment here today. Is even though each barangay exists as its own political entity, even though, as we have been saying, it is the baseline of politics and society and culture. That does not mean that they didn't ever combine to form something larger. On occasion, barangays would organize themselves into loose confederations, the head of which would be chosen from among the datu of the barangays within the confederation. This datu would be known as a pangulo, and it was the duty of the pangulo to resolve disputes between its member barangays. The pangulo was only allowed to make decisions that involved multiple barangays. Each individual barangay retains its own internal jurisdiction, and these confederations could overlap. One barangay could belong to multiple different confederations, and it is through these confederations that the barangays were able to more substantially link themselves to Asia. It is with them they were able to affect better trade, because going in mass together is better than just wandering in one at a time and potentially getting in each other's way. And so there's this sort of loose confederation. These alliances would tend to dissolve and have changing member states pretty frequently, as the political existence of a barangay is entirely dependent on the lifespan of its leader. And so, with each death of an individual datu, a barangay could leave or join confederations, or simply motion for a change in the Tangulu of the confederation, as they kind of it's a very fluid system, because it's not trying to control anything beyond, hey guys, wouldn't it be great if instead of punching each other every time we actually just talk things out?
Why would you do that? Come on.
I don't know. Sounds un-American.
No, see, the true American is to scalp your enemies. You have a disagreement, the only way to pay for it is your skull.
Well, that was dark. I was just going to export freedom, but okay.
I'm still thinking about the Treaty of Fort Laramie. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I've noticed Justin has been brooding for most of this recording here. Fort Laramie is going to be a large part as to why.
Oh, there's so much to say.
Yeah. And so if you've made it this far in the video, if you want to see us do Fort Laramie come next year with season 3 of Historical Humans, be sure to leave a comment saying what happened at Fort Laramie.
Ooh, well, depends on when we're talking.
Yep, ask us what happened at Fort Laramie, and we'll see if we make it appear in next year's settlement.
But yeah, I think we got a pretty decent amount of information covered with the Barangays. I mean, it's a shame that Aaron had to meet an unfortunate demise. That is
He's alive, mostly.
Allegedly.
But with that, we will be leaving you.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, drop a like down below. If you want to see more content like this, please be sure to subscribe. And like Colum said before, if there's a topic you would like to see us cover in a future podcast, please be sure to leave it in the comments down below or the show notes, because, we're trying to find ideas for the next season. It's not like we have a 300-page document full of ideas or anything, but yeah. See you guys.